Having a big belly cuts your attractiveness in half. Don't complain if I have an affair, it's your fault after all. These were the shocking words my husband said to me, half smiling as he looked at my pregnant belly. I stared down, speechless, and he continued his harsh tirade. In your case, it's not just halved, it's zero. Once you hit your late 30s, it's already halved. Pregnancy makes a woman's worth zero. I couldn't understand what was so funny to him as he laughed alone. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how pathetic I felt for not seeing his true nature earlier. The despair I felt at that moment was something I would never forget. Since you quit your job and have nothing to do, make sure you take care of the house and support me, especially since you lack charm now. Otherwise, let's divorce. Divorce? At that moment, I started to think it might be an option for me. As I approached my due date with a large belly, my husband didn't hesitate to demand a divorce. For me, it was the perfect timing to agree to it. After that, I gave birth at my parents' house, and 2 years had passed when my husband appeared in a frenzy. I am Jessica, 36 years old, in my 3rd year of marriage, and experiencing my first pregnancy. As my belly grew, so did my affection for the life inside me. It was something I wouldn't have understood if I hadn't become pregnant. My husband Chris is a successful salesman, 2 years older than me, working for a major corporation. He often comes home late due to overtime, and since we were dating, I've always been concerned about his health. I've left some homemade dishes in the fridge for you to eat. You'll lack vegetables if you only eat out. Thanks, I'll eat them with the lunchbox. It's really helpful that you're good at cooking. Several times a week, I used to visit Chris's apartment when he was working overtime. Even when we couldn't meet, I was happy to connect with him over the phone. Later, I want you, Jessica, to always be by my side to support me. I believe that his proposal was a sincere expression of his feelings. He didn't say to protect me or make me happy, but to support him. In fact, Chris was hopelessly bad at household chores. He would send all iron-needing laundry to the cleaners, eat meals from stores or dine out, and hire a cleaning service twice a month. I was irresistibly drawn to the gap between Chris's public persona and his private self and wanted to support him. My perfectionist nature probably made me an excellent supporter. We met in a beginner's asset management course. My hobby is learning about how money works. It started when I was a student and had a term deposit that matured at the bank. They suggested I try a foreign currency deposit, and when it unexpectedly turned a profit, I found it fascinating. From there, I became interested in the mechanisms and methods of asset management, and learning about business and self-improvement related to money became my hobby. Jessica, you study about money, but you're not really interested in it, are you? What? True, I might not have realized it. It's fun to feel like I understand the world. You really are an odd one. Everyone else thought it was strange too. The course where I met Chris was small, so I became friends with all the participants. I still keep in touch with some of them. At the time, Chris's reason for participating was to make money more easily than now. He was well paid but always complained about being tired from overtime, which I understood. But looking back, Chris really just wanted to make money the easy way. Chris seemed to have tried various ways to increase money, but in the end, he gravitated towards what seemed the easiest. After getting married, I quit my job to become a full-time housewife. Doing household chores for Chris was enjoyable and fulfilling. However, the chores in our 2-person apartment were not too demanding. With time on my hands, I eventually decided to start a part-time job as a proofreader at a publishing company. If housework starts to slip, quit the job immediately. Despite what Chris said, I had no intention of neglecting household duties. The job was a great fit for me, and I really enjoyed it. Moreover, the publishing house dealt with business and practical books, which interested me. I was constantly excited. This job might be my true calling. I get to study and earn money too. A true calling? It's just proofreading text, right? You're exaggerating. Chris laughed it off. But this job led me to an opportunity that would change my life. Among the materials I proofread was a book on starting an internet business, which piqued my interest. Since Chris often came home late, I thought I could do it as a side business during those hours. The next day, I started working on my internet business with a book and my computer. Hey, this internet business seems interesting. I'm thinking of writing a blog about everything I've studied. It might be helpful to someone, I said excitedly. Your hobbyist knowledge might be helpful. Really, you think you can make money with that? Chris laughed it off. But I was engrossed in my new hobby, working on it with great enthusiasm. My perfectionist nature was fully at play here too. The first time I saw meaningful income was 6 months after I started. I was thrilled and reported it to Chris. Just $20. What's there to be happy about? That's not even enough for pocket money. I was disappointed by his reaction, but at the same time, surpassing my husband's salary became my goal, and I became even more motivated. A while after starting my internet business, I had a reunion and a drink with the friends I met in the course. When I talked about what I was doing, some were interested and others were already doing it, leading to an engaging conversation. Perhaps feeling left out, Chris suddenly started complaining about me. What she's doing is just a game. She's not interested in money, that's why she only made $20 in half a year. I was annoyed by his demeaning tone. After getting married, she stopped being a woman. She doesn't wear makeup at home, wears sweatpants, and ties her hair like an old lady. Sitting in front of the computer, she just looks like a nerd. Chris, stop it. Are you drunk? I interjected. I thought I was marrying a good housekeeper, but then I realized any wife would do housework. Living off my money and turning into an old lady, I feel deceived. He spoke in a joking manner, but I was deeply hurt. It seemed like all my efforts for Chris were meaningless. Hey Chris, are you drunk? Jessica is still beautiful, everyone. Chris is getting a bit too drunk. Maybe it's time to wrap up, Mr. Hanson, the organizer said, noticing my teary eyes. I was so emotional that I couldn't sleep that night. From the next day, I started to dress up more even at home, but in hindsight, that might not have been a good thing. After marriage, Chris demanded more care from me and occasionally made sarcastic remarks or spoke harshly. I once tried to resist, saying, "Take care of yourself. It's your fault that I turned out like this, you know. Take responsibility and look after me to the end. After all, that's pretty much the only thing you're good for." I think I was also wrong to have indulged Chris's selfishness, but the relationship I'm in now, constantly wondering, why did I marry this man, is really painful. I found out I was pregnant in the 3rd year of our marriage. We were growing apart, but our marriage wasn't completely void of intimacy. It had been a while since I had eagerly awaited Chris's return. When I told him about the pregnancy with a smile, he clearly showed his displeasure. Who said you could get pregnant? His furrowed brow was unmistakably one of discomfort. You married me to take care of me, right? Who's going to take care of me when the child is born? I had hoped that having a child might help us rebuild a happy family despite our differences. It was a real shock to realize he had been thinking of me as just a housemate or servant all this time. I didn't want a child yet, sorry, but you'll have to abort this time. I was momentarily breathless at his unbelievable words. I had always had irregular periods and knew I had a less fertile constitution. There was no guarantee I could get pregnant again. Please let me have this child. I won't trouble you, Chris, I pleaded desperately. This might be my only chance to get pregnant. My heart was racing, making it hard to breathe. It's a nuisance that you're pregnant. Here's the deal. If you use pregnancy as an excuse to slack off at home, then you'll either have an abortion or we'll divorce. After the birth, you're taking 100% care of the kid. It's your choice to have it after all. Despite his harsh words, I was relieved to have his permission. But could I really take care of a baby and support Chris at the same time? I was full of anxiety, yet I couldn't let go of the hope that seeing our child might change him. With the pregnancy, I quit my part-time job and put more effort into my internet business. I had been running it for over 2 years and had a stable income from the first blog I started. I had recently come close to reaching my goal of earning as much as my husband's salary. Since that drinking party, Chris had been averse to hearing about my work. Don't ever talk about that in front of me again. It irritates me. Perhaps he despised people who could make easy money even though he wished for it. In the end, I never had the chance to discuss my current situation with him, nor did he show any interest in hearing about it. Keeping it to myself led to a good outcome later, but at that time, I was left feeling isolated and anxious. I was frustrated not being able to share my joy. By the 5th month of pregnancy, my belly had visibly grown. One weekend morning, while drinking coffee, Chris looked at my belly and said something shocking with a half smile. "A growing belly hides your attractiveness. Don't complain if I have an affair. It's your fault for getting pregnant." Hearing my beloved husband declare infidelity because of my pregnancy hurt me deeply. Chris continued to twist the knife. In your case, it's not just halved, it's zero. Your value as a woman halves the moment you hit your late 30s. Pregnancy makes it zero. I couldn't understand what was so funny to him. that he couldn't rejoice in the new life inside me, and instead ridiculed my changing body. My despair deepened, still holding out hope for him. Since you quit your job and have nothing to do, make sure you take care of the house and support me, especially since you lack charm now. Otherwise, let's divorce. Divorce? This must be Chris's true nature. I felt so pathetic for not realizing it before we got married. Divorce started to seem like a real possibility. Having quit my part-time job to focus on my internet business, I now easily earned more than Chris's salary. I could live comfortably even if we divorce. After his laughter, as Chris was getting ready to go out, I asked him where he was going. I don't need to tell you, do I? Maybe I'm going to see my mistress. Chris left the house laughing cheerfully. It wasn't a maybe, he was definitely going to meet his mistress. I had known about it for a while, thanks to a friend. You were at the theme park the other day, right? I wanted to say hi, but it was so crowded. I only saw Chris's face, but the woman with him was wearing a white dress, right? You two still seem so close after marriage. I'm envious. Remembering that conversation still pains me. Despite resenting Chris for causing me so much suffering, my heart still aches. I still have feelings for him, but it was time to put an end to them. I decided to hire a private investigator. Depending on the results, I was ready to cut off my feelings for Chris completely. As I approached my due date, Chris, without hesitation, demanded a divorce just as I was about to give birth. If this had been the old me, I would have probably broken down in tears, fearing the future. But now, things were different. I secretly smiled, knowing it was the perfect timing for me too. Divorce me. My girlfriend is pregnant. I want to remarry her and be a father to the child in her belly. You should remarry the father of your child too. Ha! What are you talking about? I asked, bewildered. That's Mr. Hansen's child, right? No wonder you were defending him at the party. I have proof. Chris took out a voice recorder. When he pressed play, a phone conversation between me and Mr. Hansen played. He must have hidden it in the living room. Mr. Hansen, yes, that's right. I'm not sure what will happen after the birth. Yes, I'd like to meet. Could you keep it a secret from Chris for now? What's this secret meeting with Mr. Hansen about? I never heard about you meeting him personally, Chris demanded. I sighed. He called to see if I wanted to work. But I can't say what will happen after the birth, so I've put it on hold. You can say anything, but I can't trust you anymore, Jessica. Since we're both at fault, we can agree not to demand compensation, right? To think he concocted such a lie just to save on compensation. I almost let out a smile, as I was thinking along the same lines. Okay, I agree to the divorce, but I will demand compensation from you. If you want to demand compensation from me, let's settle it in court. I threw the envelope onto the table. I received photos from the private investigator and spilled them onto the table. The images showed Chris kissing a woman and hugging her in front of her apartment. Your affair started 2 years ago. Maya is 25 and the daughter of a company president, isn't she? You wouldn't want to let her go, I said, smiling sarcastically. I'll submit this as evidence. You can submit that audio from earlier, and we'll also do a DNA test just to be clear. Chris, perhaps out of anger, was trembling, his face flushed red. He probably never thought I was investigating him. Fine, I'll pay the compensation. Maya is young and beautiful, and on top of that, she's rich. Unlike you, after remarrying, I can work at her father's company and won't need to be a corporate slave anymore. So this is what Chris really thinks, I thought, catching a young wealthy woman to make an easy fortune. I'm sick of a woman like you. I want to raise the child with Mia. When I was pregnant, he said he wasn't ready for children yet. Is this the irony of fate? Even though I thought I was over it, my heart constricted at that moment. I'll claim compensation, but if you promise never to call yourself a father to this child, I won't ask for child support. Really? Then let's do that. That child isn't mine, and make sure you never show up in front of me again. Even though it was what I wanted, hearing those words from Chris cut deeper than I imagined. Never involve yourself with us again. And about the division of property. No division of property. We're divorcing on mutual agreement, right? I was relieved he said it before I had to. All right, I'll prepare the divorce agreement. It's for the best for both of us, isn't it? Yes, no, let's make it an official document. I don't want any complications about money later on. Chris must have known deep down that the child in my belly was his. Later, we officially settled the divorce, covering compensation, child support, and property division. Chris tried to skimp on compensation, just as I didn't want to give any of my money to a man who belittled my work. I moved back to my parents' house and safely gave birth to a girl with their help. I was able to continue working while raising my child, thanks to my internet business. Nearly 2 years after giving birth, I received several calls from an unknown number. Wondering who it could be, I answered the phone. Jessica, what's this about? Explain. His shout was so loud that I instinctively moved the receiver away. Ah, he found out, I thought, sighing with irritation and annoyance. It was Chris. I heard you're successful, making over $110,000 a month. Is it about that internet business you mentioned before? Then you should have told me. It's joint property, right? Chris ranted loudly, contradicting his previous stance against discussing it. You were the one who said no property division. Remember, our divorce was mutual agreement. We even made it official with a document, so there's nothing you can do now. I'm really busy. Don't call me again for such nonsense. I responded calmly and hung up. On the other end of the phone, Chris was still ranting, but I refused to engage further. Concerned about my daughter, whom I had left at my parents' house, I called my father the next day. Apparently, Chris had stormed into my parents' house in a frenzy. I was deceived by Jessica. Please let me talk. How can you be so cunning and not feel ashamed as a parent? Jessica, let's talk properly. I won't leave until you come out. Though my father knew what I had told him, he was exasperated by Chris causing a scene at the doorstep. My father handed Chris a note with my whereabouts. Jessica is there. Go talk to her. You're the coward who cheated, destroyed your family, and abandoned your child. Get out of here. If you come here again, I'll call the police immediately. After being sternly rebuked by my father, Chris took the note and left. He probably intended to come straight to the high-end resort hotel. I was staying just a 2-hour drive from my parents' house when the front desk called me as dusk approached. I asked them to tell him to wait in the lounge and leisurely left my room. The view of the sea dyed red by the sunset from the lounge was beautiful. As I sat down in front of Chris, who looked out of place and anxious, I ordered a gin and tonic from the waiter. Why are you in such a fancy hotel? What are you drinking? Chris began, his tone accusatory. Yes, I've finished my work for today. This high-end hotel is my favorite, I answered with a smile. Work? You're making over $30,000 a month now. How is that possible? Were you deceiving me? Chris's voice was tinged with bitterness and disbelief. Deceive you? I told you many times that I was pursuing my internet business. Remember? I replied calmly, recalling his earlier dismissals. Yeah, I heard you made $20, but you never said anything after that. So, I thought you quit. How much were you making before we divorced? Chris's confusion seemed genuine, yet there was an undercurrent of resentment. I almost burst into laughter. Why is he so desperate? I thought to myself. I was already earning more than your salary before we divorced. And no way did I deceive you, I replied firmly, correcting his misunderstanding. Why did I divorce you? I've been so unlucky since, Chris continued, his tone shifting to one of self-pity. Suddenly, Chris started to talk about his current situation, seemingly deflated. Maya can't do housework at all. I thought any woman could handle that. When I get home, she leaves all the childcare to me and goes to sleep first. Unexpectedly, Chris began to praise me. You would never have done that, he admitted, recognizing my efforts in a backhanded way. He seemed to be really struggling. Maya, being from a wealthy family, likes luxuries and spends money like water. When I went to Maya's parents to apologize, they told me to take responsibility. They said they'd pay both compensation and leave the childcare to me. I knew from the private investigator's report that Maya liked older men who would spoil her. She was already on her third affair, and each time her parents cleaned up after her. That's how I received a lump sum for compensation. At least you got the compensation, Chris remarked bitterly. It's hell. If we get divorced, I have to repay the entire compensation up front. She spent all the money, and we don't have a penny left at home. On top of that, she's probably cheating again. As I remained silent, Chris must have thought I was sympathizing. I want to get back with Jessica. Now I realize how much she cared for me. If she's earning that much, she can pay the compensation in one go, right? Why would I get back together with you? Are you an idiot? I'm not your mother or your maid. Don't be ridiculous, I retorted sharply, my patience wearing thin at his selfishness. His incredibly selfish words made my blood boil. Seeing my fury, Chris looked shocked. You don't need to speak to me like that. You took care of me so much, but you chose to let that go, didn't you? The gin and tonic I ordered arrived, and regaining my composure, I took a deep breath and spoke in a calm but firm voice. We promised never to involve each other in our lives again, didn't we? I have no intention of helping or getting back together with a scumbag like you. After the call, I drank my gin and tonic in one gulp, slamming the glass down on the table. I'm going abroad next week. My work can be done from anywhere, and I keep making money even as we speak. That's the system I've built. And just to correct you, my monthly income isn't $10,000. It's $30,000. If you ever show up at my parents' house or let my daughter see you, you'll pay the agreed-upon penalty of $50,000 in one lump sum. I added firmly, leaving Chris gaping and speechless as I walked away. The divorce agreement stipulated that if Chris showed his face to our daughter or if she went to see him, we'd each pay a $50,000 penalty. This would surely be the last time I ever saw Chris. Finally, I felt completely relieved. Chris continued his marriage with Mia, but it wasn't the life he had dreamed of. He was burdened with caring for Mia's troublesome daughter by her parents. Unable to change jobs from his overworking company, he looked worn out from balancing work and childcare every day. Despite everything, I hoped he would learn the difficulty and joy of caring for someone through parenting. Maya was reportedly involved in another affair and being sued for compensation by the wife of her partner. But it was unclear if Chris had the ability to pay. Perhaps Chris would decide to divorce for the sake of the child. As for me, my work was thriving, and I was being invited to give lectures in various places. It felt great to help others with what I had learned and practiced. It all started when Mr. Hansen invited me to speak about my approach to work at a study session he was organizing. It was the same discussion we had during the bugged phone call. I still maintained a good business relationship with him. My daughter was growing up fast, turning into a wonderful child, much to my pride as a parent. Despite the hardships, I learned a lot from my marriage with Chris. If I wanted my daughter to grow well, I knew not to be overly protective. I planned to continue watching her grow, respecting her independence.